Which one? Okay. No, you don't have to turn those in because it automatically saves and I can see it. Yeah. Okay, so I will talk to you about that after we're done, because this is not going to take too long today. So make sure you guys are turning in your work. I have graded everything that has been turned in through Schoology. I've also put comments, so you might want to go in and check, because some of you guys did really great jobs on sharing the biases, but you guys didn't necessarily identify it at the bottom. So that was 10 points. So if you go put that in, I'll give you the additional 10 points, okay? That's what I did. Yeah, I think. So, and then when I let you guys to go work on your stuff, I can help you individually if you need to, okay? So just a quick recap. What is a bias? What is it? What's a bias? Anybody? It's a preconceived way of thinking. Okay, is racism a bias? It's a form of a bias, so yes, it is. But is all biases racist? No, okay. Do we all have them? All right, cool. So we're gonna be moving on from biases, which are opinions, and we're gonna go into reasoning, logical reasoning, which is more than a mere opinion. I need everybody to be looking at me. Pay attention to the short Mexican at the front, please. Okay, so what is logical reasoning? Well, it's actually made up of two parts, inductive and deductive reasoning. Have y'all ever heard those terms? I've talked a little bit about it, yeah. So, let me make this smaller. So as we begin discussing different texts and supporting our opinions, because we're going to go into looking at social media and how that affects social reform, we're going to be looking at some articles. But we can't discuss them if we don't use inductive and deductive reasoning. So that basically means using logical reasoning turns your simple opinion into a valid, substantiated, or strongly supported conclusion. What's substantiated? Using context clues. What is substantiated? What do you think it means? Okay, so substantiated means it's true because there's evidence to prove it's true. Okay? So, in both discussions and in your writing, you never want an opinion to be unsubstantiated or lacking enough support to be proven true. Therefore, you always want to make sure your support has a high level of relevance, meaning your support is connected to or related to the topic being discussed. This issue can come in the form of anecdotal and or empirical details. Anecdotal details are those that are based on personal observations. So how do we know they're true if they're personal observations? You don't know if they're true? How do we know that like those personal observations are true? Because you experience them, right? You see them, you experience them. And then we have empirical details, which are observations based on verifiable facts that are often considered scientific. So whenever you're in science class, math class, they talk about empirical details. Whenever you do an experiment, you find empirical details. Okay, so we're going to go more into that. So all of this might seem like gibberish. So I want to do a more in-depth study on it so that you have a stronger understanding, because you cannot use these reasonings if you do not understand them. Okay. So that's going to come in the form of a Nearpod that I'm going to walk you through. However, there are activities in this Nearpod that need to be completed. So on your own, you're going to go back through it. You're going to put your name, first and last name. You're going to join the lesson and you're going to go through the activities so that I can give you a grade. Okay? This needs to be done by Friday by 11:59 p.m. Any questions on that? All right. So, logical reasoning. It's more than a mere opinion. So here it says, I'm sorry, but your opinion means very little to me. So if I was just to say the Longhorns are the best football team in the world, right? And I just left it at that. And you asked me, Ms. Garcia, why do you think that? And I was like, because I do. Does it matter? Are you likely to believe me? No, right? But if I sit there and I list the record, if I talk about my own experience with them, then you might be more willing to at least consider what I'm saying, right? So that's why you need to be using logical reasoning. But what is it? Well, logic, a proper way of thinking about or understanding something, the science that studies the processes used in thinking. So basically, that's just logic is the way we think about things, how we go about thinking about something. So Ms. Garcia has a degree in English, but my minor is in philosophy, which is the study of thinking. So when people talk about logic, one of the most common things they talk about is, okay, how do you know he's sitting there? But do you really see him sitting there? How do you know you see him sitting there? But what's telling you? How do you know that you're not being controlled and somebody's actually controlling your mind and telling you that he's there? Have you touched him? Are you sure he's there? Right? You might be in the matrix. There might be a computer, right? Those are the type of questions logic actually handles, is the way we think about things. How do we prove what we think, right? So there's a common phrase, I think, therefore I am, right? It's our thinking that makes us who we are. So that's logic. But reasoning is the ability of the mind to think and understand things. The process of thinking about something in order to form a conclusion or judgment. So if you put those two together, logical reasoning is basically the processes we use in thinking to come up with our conclusions. Neat. Keep that in mind, because the open-ended question is going to be for you to combine and create your own definition of logical reasoning, okay? So why is it important? Logical reasoning, or logic for short, is one of the fundamental or foundational skills for effective thinking. You have to be able to understand how you're thinking about things. How do you prove what you think? So to be able to think logically, we use inductive reasoning and deductive reasoning. And there's a key difference between the two. Jalen, please put it down. Thank you. So the key difference, inductive reasoning. We start with specific evidence. What does specific mean? Exact, yeah, like exact. Very narrow. Specific evidence to create a general conclusion. General means broad, okay? So we have inductive. This is used a lot of times in science, right? We take certain evidence and then we come up with our conclusion. For deductive, we take general ideas or premises, so it's broader, and come up with a very specific conclusion. Okay, so you see the difference? One goes from specific to general, the other one goes from general to specific. Okay, you might get the terminology mixed up every once in a while, but I do want you to know the key difference, okay? Any questions? Yes, no, maybe so? All right, cool. So, inductive reasoning is a type of logic that utilizes evidential support to draw general conclusions. So I don't need your opinions, I have the evidence. So this is a lot of scientific stuff, right? We use this a lot in science and math. Types of evidential support, specific incidents that you have personally experienced. Why is it important that it's personal? Anybody? Who experiences it if it's personal? You. So I can testify that this happened. But if I say, well, my son experienced blah, 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 and I didn't see it with my own eyes, is that the right type of evidence? No. Observations that you have made. So this happens a lot when you are in science, when you do like an experiment. You observe the outcomes of it, and then therefore you can draw the conclusion. And facts you know to be true or false. So if I state something like, the sun revolves around the world. Is that true? The sun revolves around the world. Oh, no. No. What's the actual fact? The world revolves around the sun. So you actually have a whole bunch of evidence that can prove that to me, right? So your reasoning, your inductive reasoning would be true and mine would be false. Okay? This happens with a lot of the flat earthers. Have y'all heard of that theory? Huh? Yeah, right. There's people out there that believe that the world is flat. However, it is spherical, and we have a whole bunch of evidence, right? And so that's when you would use inductive reasoning to say your premise or your statement is false because I have X, Y, and Z evidence to prove it. Okay. So types of inductive evidence. You've seen this before. I've just kind of cut it apart. There's a story or antecedent, an example, or fact or statistic. And again, a statistic is basically a fact with numbers. Okay. This tends to be a little bit more, has more strength to it than these two. Why do you think that? Why do you think this is stronger than this? Yeah. These are actual studies that normally have been proven. And for experiments to be proven true, they have to be able to replicate it over and over and over again. So these tend to be stronger than this, right? Because this is influenced by my what? By your opinions, and specifically what's it influenced by? We just learned it. There's a word we just learned that's about opinions. Starts with a B. Bias. Bias. Thank you. Our biases influence this one. So any questions about inductive evidence? Nope? Okay, cool. So this is an activity you're going to do. You're going to fill this in. It needs to be done because it will be graded. All right, now we can move on to deductive. And this one is not as specific as inductive. This is the one we use the most in English, okay? So it's a type of logic that uses general statement or premise to reach a specific conclusion. So another synonym for premise is a hypothesis. Have you all ever heard that? Yes, okay, so it's a general statement that you want to prove is true. So that's the same thing in English, but we use the word premise. And I use this word a lot because that is a key foundation of philosophy that we can debate. So you talk about premise a lot. What is your general idea or stance on how do you prove that premise? So a premise is believed to be true, and then you have to provide support. Types of premises is inferencing. Have you guys ever heard of inferencing? Yeah, okay. We do it all the time. So inferencing, so to infer means to form an opinion based on general hints provided. So have you ever been coming up on like a interaction and people are yelling at each other or starting to get in each other's faces? What can I infer? That they're about to fight. Has anybody told me? No, I can see it, right? So those are inferences when you kind of gauge everything around you and figure it out. We do that in reading, we do that in everyday life. Therefore, inferencing is the process of creating an opinion based on implied clues. So nothing's directly saying, fight, fight, fight. We're like, no, I know that behavior, and I hear that the volume's going up, something's about to happen, right? It happens all the time. So here, don't you see the clues, Morty? They are everywhere. So sometimes the clues you see may not be the same clues somebody else is seeing, okay? There are gonna be times when we read something and you will say, well, I can infer this, and somebody will say, I didn't get that. This is what I think. Because inferencing is heavily relying upon your previous biases, right? My interactions are gonna influence how I see something versus your interactions with the world, okay? So in terms of English, the author implies in order for the reader to infer. So what does that mean? The author gives you the clues or hints about what's going on, and the reader draws specific conclusions based on those general conclusions. This is why if we read a text and maybe you don't come to the same conclusion as me, I'm not necessarily going to count that wrong. But what do you have to be able to do? State the facts. Prove to me. Show me the hints where you got that. Explain to me, okay? Literature and English are very subjective. What does that mean? Subjective means it's influenced by the way I think and feel, okay? Objective means I can be kind of impartial. I don't have any biases, but we all have biases. So therefore, when you read something, It's influenced by what your life experience is. So that's what inferencing does. You take your own life experiences, your own thoughts, and the hints provided, and you create conclusions. Make sense? All right. So, types of deductive evidence. Quotes. They're a verbatim statement. What does verbatim mean? Word by word. Now, do I ever use somebody else's words and not give them credit? No. No. You never just use it as your own. That's stealing. Okay? Think if you spent hours and hours on a project and then somebody came and changed the name on it and put theirs, would you be happy? No, you'd be like, hey, that's my work. Well, that's the same thing with authors and people that write. It takes a long time to write. Is writing easy? No. So think about how many hours they spend for you just to come in and be like, oh, that's mine now. So don't be a work thief. You want to give them credit. Quotes can also come in the form of paraphrases. Does anybody know what a paraphrase is? It's okay. So basically, paraphrasing is taking what was said and making it your own in your own words. But the idea is the same, and you still give them credit because it was not your idea, it was their idea. Okay? Yeah. So think when you're retelling a story, right? Like, oh, so-and-so told me this, this, and this, and this, right? Are you telling it the exact same way they did? No, you're paraphrasing. You're making it your own. But you're going to say, well, so-and-so said, right? You gave them credit. Scenarios. So those are things that you think that can happen in the future. Can I prove that's going to happen? No, but I'm saying I think this is what's going to happen in the future based off the clues that I have. Okay? So this is the types of evidence we use to make those inferencing. And inferencing is the main way we use deductive reasoning. Okay, so it's basically, think of it, deductive almost like a detective, right? I'm a detective, I'm finding the clues, and I'm going to come up to my own conclusion. Okay? Any questions? All right. So in conclusion, we use inductive reasoning and deductive reasoning to effectively think about a text and draw conclusions in order to understand what we have read. So every time you tell me, well, I think this is what it means, well, why? You're going to have to give me an explanation and prove to me your reasoning skills. Okay? English is all about honing these skills and making them to where you see beyond the surface. So are there any questions with that? Okay. At the end of it, you also have a matching activity that you need to do. And so you need to match the pairs, okay? So now that you know all of that stuff, here's your actual assignment for the day. Outside of the nearby, you do need to go to your Unit 2 vocabulary. You need to find the section that says reasoning, evidence, and inference. And then you are going to use the definitions that were provided up here. And Ms. Garcia is nice, so she highlights them. Put the definitions from here and also in the Nearpod into your notebook. It is due on Friday by 11:59, and I'm going to be checking it. You have to complete the whole section. So if there's words that I have not defined for you, you need to use the Merriam-Webster online dictionary. I do want you to use this particular dictionary to find the definitions, because you can type a word into Google and dictionary.com might come up, or a different thing might come up. I want you to use Merriam-Webster. All right, is there any questions? Sound easy? All right, so for the rest of the class period, go ahead and work on this. If you have not gotten your previous work, you need to go ahead and get that in, especially if it's the digital locker, the context clues, or the bias story. If you turned in the bias story, go see the comments, because some of you, there was maybe 10 points taken off, but I will give you those 10 points if you correct it. So if you have any questions, let me know. Okay, so Stephanie, is there anything, do you have any questions? Okay, so if you're done, if you don't have any questions, Stephanie, you can go ahead and log out, and I'll keep the Zoom up if you have any questions, okay? Yes.